Hey, George. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Robin. Very excited today. It's your first show as co-host of Beyond the Therapy Session. How you feeling? How you feeling?
I feel pretty good, a little bit nervous, but pretty good. How about you? How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It's gonna be a nice new dynamic, and honestly, I feel like today's topic is just very interesting and kind of resonates a lot with me. So I'm looking forward to discussing some of those points with you today. And yeah, today's topic is, we're going to be talking about cognitive behavioral therapy and, how your thoughts impact your behavior.
That's exactly right, George. Um, and I'm also very excited, just so you know. Looking forward to a wonderful collaboration with you. Yeah, this is a really interesting topic, um, not just because of CBT in of itself. You know, CBT has been around since the 60s. It's not some newfangled, new age something. It was founded by Aaron Beck, and it's been used for multiple types of mental health issues, behavioral issues, eating disorders, OCD, depression, trauma. CBT has been morphed into special, like there's ICBT, insomnia CBT, there's TF CBT, trauma focused CBT. So it's, not new. And unfortunately, neither are automatic negative thoughts that many people really struggle with significantly, that to the point where their life is really impacted, severely limited, not able to reach goals that they would like to. And unfortunately, is that most of these automatic negative thoughts, and I'll explain in a minute why we stress this automatic, uh, it's self-directed, right? Self-punishing. It's usually the thoughts are around something, bad about that person's self, about their appearance, about their abilities, uh, imagining, thinking what other people are thinking about me, and they're also thinking negative thoughts about me. So it's so disruptive. They're very intrusive, and we say automatic because it's like a habit. It becomes out of the person's awareness.
It's like a part of it becomes part of like your routine sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's just like, you don't think about it, right? At
Yeah.
all. Think about the things that you do every single day. And because you've already learned how to do them, you probably learned how to do them when you were little, like brushing your teeth. It's a perfect example, right? When you're brushing your teeth, you're not thinking about, first I have to take the brush and then I have to get the toothpaste. And then, you're not thinking step by step. You automatically go into your bathroom, you reach for wherever your toothbrush is, wherever your toothpaste is. You have whatever routine you have, what goes first, what comes second. And then when you brush, even if you're staring at yourself in the mirror, you're not thinking about, this is what the bristles feel like, this is what, right? You're usually thinking about what your day is going to be like, what you're going to give your kids for breakfast, right? You're not
Yeah.
thinking about, but it doesn't stop you from brushing your teeth, right? You know how to brush your teeth. So that's sort of an example of any kind of habit, things that you no longer think about but you automatically do. So sometimes those things are good, like brushing your teeth, but other times they're not good. And when something becomes a habit, they're out of your present awareness, right? So you have to sort of learn how to bring them up. I always say to my patients, bring them up front. Like I go like this to them, like here, like make them part of your everyday. Um, because if not, then how can you possibly stop them, interrupt them, substitute some positive for these negative thoughts? Usually people that experience these automatic negative thoughts, they're not thinking about the thoughts, but they can feel the anxiety symptoms that these thoughts often trigger. Now, I can make the case for what comes first, kind of the anxiety of the thought, or the thought then the anxiety, but I think it's kind of cyclical.
Yeah.
You think it all starts at a very, very early age, sometimes infancy even. Um, and starts with the initial anxiety.
You think that gets brought in from like the parents, the way kids were raised, or just their whole environment at an early age?
I do, George. I think it's it can be one of those things or a combination or all of those things, right? So, and I'm going to say this. This is my belief. I'm sure there are other therapists out there that might disagree with me, and there are other theorists that might disagree with me. But um, I see it as like, let's say when a child is an infant, they are not consistently fed or they're not consistently cared for. Um, their survival instinct triggers this anxiety because that's what they're living on, survival instincts, right? Because, infants, right? They don't know words, language. They don't say, hey, I'm hungry. Where is the person who's supposed to feed me now? Instead, they'll cry to try and make their needs known. So, if when we're little, our needs are not met or not consistently met or overly met, right? Meaning like a parent that is, or not just parent, could be a primary caregiver that's like constantly hovering, holding, giving,
Coddling, like, oh, don't do this, don't do that, stop, like just on
constant,
top.
right? So these things drive anxiety. For the parents, the caregivers that I guess now this term, this helicopter parenting, I think that's it, but I'm not 100% sure. But this idea of don't worry, like I'm protecting you from everything, everything. So that inhibits then the child's ability to discover the world, discover themselves in the world. So when they do have to go off on their own, and whatever that may look like, it could be daycare because the primary caregiver isn't there, the anxiety, that separation anxiety begins, right? Where are you? Are you ever coming back? So if you look at it in one of these kinds of ways and you're little, so you already have this anxiety, like, I don't know what's going to happen, or I don't know if I'm going to be okay, if I can survive. Um, as you get older, that just keeps morphing like into other things. So now you have a young child or a middle-aged child that's approaching the world already from a slightly anxious or maybe even a highly anxious, depending on how chaotic maybe that environment would be growing up, and other things too, by the way. It's not just about parenting, so I don't want to make it seem that way. It can be for people that move around a lot, or have inconsistent food, like maybe people that grow up in homes that don't have enough money to have 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day.
Can it also come from like schooling, or things kids, the type of content kids are consuming at an early age, or entertainment, video games, things like that also?
George, that is a highly debated topic. So I'd say yes, definitely to part of it, right? So I mean, think about it, right? If you're going to go, let's say you are going to go to a party, right? Let's imagine yourself like as a teenager, a young teenager, 13, 14, and you're going to go to some school party. It's not that you don't know everybody that's going to be there, you do. But if you are already approaching and thinking about this event as something potentially scary or something that you feel you may not be competent at. It's very common to hear, especially from teenagers, like, what if I'm boring? What if I don't know what to say? What if I can't keep up a conversation? I don't want to go and introduce myself. I do better when someone introduces themselves first and then I can talk. It's from this self doubt, right? That's what we start to talk about: self esteem issues, self worth issues, self confidence. But anxiety drives those because anxiety drives these negative thoughts, right? If you think about young kids, kids never, they're not able even to look at their parents and say, hey, this is your fault, right? Like, why aren't you here when I need you? Why didn't you pick me up when I needed to be picked up? Why didn't you hug me or whatever? Something like that. Instead, kids interpret this as something wrong with them, something lacking in them. and also something that they think they can ultimately fix, right? Like, um, I'll work harder, I'll study harder, I'll get better grades, I'll clean my room, I'll, help with the chores. They think that if they do something more that they perceive as lacking, and this is why they're not getting their needs met, that if they do these things, this in turn will get their needs met. Only that doesn't happen because it isn't their fault. Them doing more homework or getting A's or doing laundry is not going to change that. So every time they think this and they practice, look, I'm going to try this, and it still doesn't work, it's like compounding, compounding, compounding. And it just keeps being internalized and pointed to themselves. So the older they get, they stop hearing maybe their caregiver's voice, right? And now they own these thoughts about themselves. It's their voice. So now you're going into adolescence, late adolescence, early adulthood, and now you have somebody who is maybe socially anxious or generalized anxiety, um, maybe even somebody with some forms of OCD, which is different than anxiety, but can also morph or stem out into some OCD related symptoms. And then it starts to interfere with relationships, maintaining relationships, growing relationships, um, going for jobs you want to go for, and feeling that you can succeed, even understanding what your own needs actually are, because you have not been able to develop a full sense of self and be completely independent and feel confident in yourself and in that independence.
Like, what's a way that you would say someone who has, generally from their perspective, they think they had a good upbringing, but what's a good way for someone to maybe identify these automatic negative thoughts within their own day-to-day routines? Like, what are some tips that you can give people to, like, figure that in themselves?
So there's several things. The most important thing, as I said, is to find ways to bring these automatic thoughts that kind of lurk around in the back of your brain and bring them forward, meaning so that you become more and more aware of what's behind maybe a particular feeling, right? So a thought, um, a thought can happen, right? Like, okay, let's say I'm going I'm going to work, and I get to work and I see there's a message for me that my boss wants to talk to me. Now, all of us sometimes see that and our stomach does maybe a little flip, like, ooh, why does my boss want to talk to me? But for the person that's already struggling with self worth and self esteem, they take it like to the next step, right? Most of us will be able to say, oh, it's probably nothing or whatever, but I can deal with it. Whatever it'll be, I'll manage it, right? But that person, it keeps growing, and it grows into a whole internal dialogue. So now their physical anxiety symptoms like stomach ache, dry throat, maybe even like some shaking, feeling cold, like when you're scared, right? Like think about real fear. But in their head is like this whole scenario that they're creating themselves, not based in reality, because, right, all we know for a fact is that your boss wants to meet you at 3 o'clock. That's the fact. But in their head, they've created this whole other thing. I think this is going to happen, and I bet this is going to happen. And then if that happens, then I'm going to have to do this. And it just like snowballs. So sometimes with my patients, I ask them to start by keeping a journal or keeping I call a thought log. There are many of these CBT worksheets online for free. Anybody can get them. And you practice by writing down, like, let's say you recognize, like, ugh, I'm in this moment feeling sick. You take out your journal and you put down all your thoughts, how you're feeling. Usually there's a rating like from 0 to 10 or 0 to 100, depending on the worksheet, like how intense those feelings may be. And then after the situation is over, you can go back and look at it and say, what could I have done instead? right? So instead, talking yourself off the ledge, like, it's nothing, but I can handle it, like reciting things to yourself. I can handle it. I'm capable. My boss, I've never had a problem before. You try and challenge these faulty belief systems, right? That's what automatic negative thoughts create, this whole faulty belief system, meaning not based in any kind of reality. So you confront that with the facts. Like, let me check, like reality check, right? Exactly it. So, is this really true? Did I do anything? Like, why would I be fired? Is this my mind running away with me? So it takes practice, right? And it is difficult in the beginning, when especially if you've already had years of practicing doing it this way. So if you think about trying to change any other kind of habit, right, or break a habit, it takes practice and becoming more and more aware of the impulses that are generating you're feeling this way, these thoughts. Um, I give this, and I'm not always sure that this is a good example, but I think about quitting smoking cigarettes, right? People smoke all the time and they want to quit. The average person who wants to quit makes 7 attempts before they actually quit. And it's not because the person doesn't want to, but often they don't understand why they smoke. Usually it's anxiety, right? You
Yeah.
say, I need a cigarette, right? Why? Something happened. I'm scared. I'm nervous. I'm worried, whatever. But how do you catch that and how do you interrupt it before you pick up the cigarette? Doesn't stop the urges from coming. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges with automatic thoughts, is that even while you're working on it, the thoughts still keep coming. The anxiety remains present. It lessens and lessens over time, but it does take practice and it does take some work.
Do you think that that 7 attempt thing is also like more of a general thing with quitting other habits, or is it just like specific to cigarettes, you think?
That's research specific to cigarettes.
Okay.
But I can tell you, I quit smoking a long time ago, over 30 years ago. And I just looked at my cigarettes one day and I was like, you know what? I don't even like them anymore. Why am I still smoking? And I threw the pack in the garbage and I never smoked again. But that's not at all typical. And when people are working on challenging these negative thoughts about themselves, they're going to have successes and then they're going to have steps back, right? Because that's how human beings change. We don't change like from 0 to 100 in one long straight path. It's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. Because automatic thoughts, they become like your default, right? So when things get very stressful, even if the person has made wonderful strides and really made a difference in their lives, if they something very stressful, very anxiety provoking happens, it's not unusual if not a lot of time has passed by practicing these new behaviors and challenging your thoughts, you'll go back to the default, the thing you're used to. So it does take time, and it does take practice.
Awesome. So you suggest also, you said, right? What was it? A thought journal?
Yes, you can keep, there's a thought log. You can just keep journals to start. Um, Distractions. I mean, this is just general good stuff for anxiety, really, anyway. It's If you think about what we've been talking about, that these negative thoughts, right, they all exist like in my mind, right? You don't know what I'm thinking. I don't know what you're thinking. So, one of the best things to do to drop your anxiety level is to distract yourself. And sometimes just simply getting up, go walk to your kitchen, pour a glass of water. Usually, things that involve your hands are the most distracting because you have to pay a little bit of attention, right? So if I'm getting to get a glass, I'll go in the refrigerator and get a bottle or a pitcher and pour. I have to pay attention. So I'm out of my head.
Yeah, and some other things that you mentioned that were interesting to me, just because of the way that I perceive things, and so usually if I have these automatic negative thoughts, I don't try to bring them to the forefront. I feel, just the way I've thought generally is like, okay, if I pay too much mind to it, it's gonna like overpower. It's gonna become even stronger. So I do try to suppress that sometimes. So what are some of the negatives of suppressing the negative thoughts?
George, that is a very insightful and good question. Um, so, repression, trying to think of the quickest way to describe. So, we're all born with certain defense mechanisms, denial, repression, is just a couple, right? And they serve us well. They can serve us well when used appropriately. But when someone overuses anything, not good. So a good thing turns to an unhealthy thing. And when feelings get repressed for a prolonged period of time, they end up coming out. I always say to my patients, they come out sideways, meaning they kind of leak out in situations that's like inappropriate, right? Or you'll have reactions that to something someone else will look at and be like, "Oh, that's not great," but your reaction will be like, "Oh, so over the top," and people will look back at you and say, "Wait, that's what's going on with you," right? Or you get irritable or easily agitated, and it's because these things need to be processed, right? They have to come out and be dealt with. Otherwise, they'll come out in all kinds of ways that you don't want them to, and then create new problems.
As you're saying this, I'm like realizing, say you are correct. Like I've some of the symptoms you're saying from repression, I can see it coming out sometimes in myself. So that's like very insightful as well. No, thank you. And
And
I also have another question. So like, are do automatic negative thoughts and like intrusive thoughts, do those go like hand in hand with each other? Is there any similarities?
yes, there is. I mean, in my mind, I see them as the same. I think that probably other therapists will see intrusive thoughts as something a little more debilitating for that person, um, where in a moment it can be extremely disruptive, right? So like in a simple exchange between somebody, or about to like enter a party or a restaurant to meet friends, or even going home and maybe seeing your family or your significant other, going out with a friend at a work meeting, um, they become louder. Like that's how I see like the word intrusive, right? Think about that word. It's like you're really interrupting me. Those thoughts, they just become louder and more pronounced. Um, Sometimes I think that some therapists use intrusive thoughts to designate things that are maybe more particular, more potentially harmful, either self harmful or the potential to harm someone else in some kind of way. Um, but I still see this as automatic in nature because it's not something that the person actually wants. It's not like I really want to, I don't know, I don't want to
Cut
say
this
something.
car off, or like,
Right,
kind of road rage type of things,
right.
or
I mean, I'm careful to cross over into the rage anger thing because I think that's a different issue, which I'm
okay.
totally not an expert in, although I have had mild road rage a couple of times myself. Um, but I feel like like with intrusive thoughts, people might have these ideas about hurting themselves, let's say, but they don't feel suicidal. But they imagine, what would it be like if, right? What would it be like if I jumped off this bridge? Or what would it be like if I picked up a razor and cut myself? And it's confusing and scary to that person because they don't want to hurt themselves. They don't want to kill themselves. They don't want to end their lives, but they're having these thoughts. Um, I'm not going to say that I'm an expert in that particular area. I feel like it the likelihood that it does generate from similar some early anxiety is probably true, but when something is that intrusive and disruptive but doesn't match what's really going on with you, it's like much bigger, right, than saying like, oh, I bet everybody's looking at me or listening to me and they think I'm stupid, right? So that's not as scary because thinking I'm stupid, I'm not saying I'm going to hurt myself. But it is also disruptive because then I won't talk anymore, right? I won't talk in meetings, I won't share my knowledge, or I won't ask questions, and I put myself in a position where then I don't get to grow as a human and I don't get to achieve whatever goals I have in life.
Yeah, and like from taking from the convo, one of the right from the beginning, what was interesting to me, and it kind of highlights how maybe this can affect everybody, right? Is how you, and I might be paraphrasing, but when you stated that if early on in your childhood you get like under nurtured or you get over nurtured, like it can cause it. So it's like whether you got a lot of good stuff early on or a little bit, there's still a high probability that you are dealing with these automatic negative thoughts, and it's a good way to like highlight and address, and maybe not point fingers, but just really, like you said, bring it to the forefront and try to put it all into perspective and give yourself a reality check.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I think all of us are not, I don't say prone to, but we're all open to having self-doubt, right? Or not having as much confidence in a situation that maybe we have in others. Um, but I think for those people, we're able to push through and work through it and still do. People that have these persistent, right, thoughts, these ruminating, right, so it's like like a fly buzzing around in your head that just won't go away. It's very difficult. But I think when you match some mindfulness techniques, right, breathing techniques, body scan, grounding work, along with like these distraction techniques. Grounding is great also to bring down anxiety. When you can really bring down your own anxiety, um, it's very empowering when you recognize like your heart's racing, you feel sick to your stomach, you feel lightheaded or whatever it may be, and then you realize, oh, I can just do this grounding technique for a couple of minutes, and then I go from a 10, which is the highest number, and woof, in a couple of minutes I'm to a 5. It's much more doable, right, to go through whatever you need to do at a 5 than it is at a 10.
It's fantastic, fantastic. Do you have any automatic negative thoughts about me, Robin?
George, no way. You are one of my favorite people. I love talking to you. You're always interesting and you're always interested in things. So I have nothing negative about you at all.
Awesome, awesome. And all I could say is this is what a way to start off our co-hosting ship. This was fantastic, very great talks, and I think it could serve a lot of people well. So yeah, no, Robin, great show today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to continuing beyond the therapy session with you.
Thank you, George. I really appreciate it. And I know I feel like I can go on and on and on with all these topics. So thank you for allowing me to share some of what I know. And I am so excited about working with you.
All right, see you guys next time.
Okay, bye, everyone.